Are you snatched? Because I am. Tight lacing. The practice of wearing a corset extremely tight to achieve a dramatic reduction in waist size in an hourglass figure. I know you've heard of all the dangers of corsets and tight lacing and waist training, but is it true? Is tight lacing dangerous? To get to the dangers of tight lacing, we need to go all the way back to corsets. The first found images of a corset can be seen on this Minoan snake goddess figurine found in 1600 BC. The figurine can be seen wearing what looks to be an underbust corset, along with some other cultural clothing. The first person to be credited with the invention of the corset is Roxy Ann Kaplan. Her design for the corset will be used as the basis of the Victorian-style corset. Her design was strapless and came with laces to narrow the waist, which also support and shape the bust. Corsets became the standard undergarment in Western fashion around the 16th century to the early 20th century. Tight lacing began in the 1820s and 30s, after they added steel eyelets to the back of the corset. The steel eyelets allowed you to lace the corset much tighter without damaging the corset. Tight lacing was more popular among middle-class and lower-middle-class women, as these women were hoping to change their station in life. They hoped that by cinching their waist as small as possible, they could attract a suitable gentleman to lift them into a better life. Dress historians estimated that the average corseted waist size of a woman in the 1800s was about 21 inches or 53 centimeters. Uncorseted, it was about 27 inches. Around the late Victorian era, medical reports and rumors start to go around warning women of the medical risk of tight lacing. They told women that it was fatally detrimental to their health. Around this time, people also started to see them as vain and slaves to fashion, and they started to be socially shunned. Then came the rise of the dress reformers. Dress reformers were a group of mostly women who advocated for more practical and comfortable clothing. They told them that their corsets were too restrictive, that they needed their waist free so that they could work more efficiently and exercise for their health. They also emphasized the possible negative consequences on their reproductive health. Was tight lacing really this dangerous? According to medical experts, tight lacing can cause a reduced lung capacity, leading to shortness of breath and fainting, skin irritation, as the corset's rubbing against your skin all day. They were also worried about compressing the ribs. Now, the ribs do protect your organs, but your ribs are bones. So, when they're using steel corsets and they're putting constant pressure on their ribs, it could cause the bones slowly over time to shift. I know we've all seen this illustration, but there's actually a museum with the bones of a person who was tight lacing, and you can see where the corset pushed their bones and their ribs actually shifted in.
What happens when you wear a corset for a prolonged period of time? This is a skeleton here at the Bone Museum with evidence of tight-laced corsetry. Corsets were worn as a structural undergarment, but during the Victorian times, it became highly fashionable to wear increasingly tight corsets to give yourself the smallest waist possible. If we look at these two skeletons side by side, we can see a difference in the size and shape of the rib cage. This would start to be worn in adolescence when your bones are still malleable and your body is already used to being in a tight garment. But with the rising popularity of tight-laced corsetry and smaller corsets, that would actually warp your bone structure as they would be worn for hours on end. Now, it's important to differentiate that a regular corset is not going to do this, but extreme tight lacing will.
Another possible health risk is organ deformity. So over time, as your ribs are pressing into your organs, it could cause them to deform in shape after a while. Is this going to have any effect on your organ function? It could have an effect on your digestion, which is really, really dangerous. It could cause constipation, and then after a while, it becomes a very dangerous situation. Because if you're backed up after a while, you cannot excrete your body's waste. It can turn into a real medical issue. And if you have reproductive issues already, a corset kind of pressing onto your organs, if they're inflamed or anything like that, can exacerbate those issues. So there is some validity to the concerns. Despite all of the medical advice and the dress reformers, the women persisted. They kept tight lacing for years and years and years, up until the early 20th century. Around the 1910s and 1920s, it started to fall out of fashion anyway. Also, this is around the time that the First World War started, so they needed the steel in the factories to make weapons and things like that. So they didn't really have the leftover steel to make more corsets. There were still corsets, but because of the scarcity of the steel, it made the corsets very unaffordable for the women who were wearing them and who were tight lacing. So that's where tight lacing fell out of popularity. There are still women who tight lace today. I have seen a few women on news and on TV shows and things like that who are tight lacing, and I mean, they seem to be happy and healthy for now. Hopefully they continue to be happy and healthy, but just be careful. Also, there's a rise in waist training. Now, do I think that waist training is effective? No, honestly, I don't. Because when you think about it, waist training is just like putting on a really tight like undergarment. When you take it off, everything's gonna go back to the way it was. You might have a little temporary shaping, but like just be very careful. Do not wear your corset or your waist trainer to bed. Let me know what else you want to see in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.